Hey there, interwebs! I bet you're wondering where I got this super sexy hat. Well, I got it in the super secret Starfleet gift store, because I'm just that cool now. Also, I'm a hat person, because hats are cool. This is just me. This is my personality now. Yes, interwebs, it is my favorite time of week because I yet again get to review another episode of Star Trek Lower Decks, this time Season 2, Episode 6, The Spy Humongous, which I'm not entirely sure what the title is reference to other than, like, the phrase Spy Among Us. I mean, I know there's an episode of The Next Generation, Lonely Among Us, where, like, everyone gets, like, electrocuted by that really bad, like, visual, like, electrocution effect that they used all the time in The Next Generation. But other than that, I'm not entirely sure if the title's a reference to anything, so if you know, let me know. But speaking of bad visual effects from the TNG era, let's actually talk about Lower Decks, because I'm going to get into my spoiler-free thoughts on this episode and then go fully into spoilers here. So, spoiler-free, what did I think of The Spy Humongous? I have to say, initially, when I started off this episode, the first, like, fourth of it to a third of it, I honestly wasn't really feeling it all that much. I was kind of like, this is fine, this is okay, but I felt it was starting to retread a couple little bits of ground that we had already done with characters like Boimler and Tendi already, and so I was a little bit worried about that. But then as the episode went on, there was some really great little sketches and bits throughout, but also managed to actually subvert my expectations in really kind of subtle and nice ways to show me, again, how far these characters have actually come in a much more nuanced way than sort of like obvious signposts of where these characters would be at this moment, but like actually showing me like, no, these characters have changed. They're not exactly the same people that they were, especially in the case of Boimler throughout this episode, but doing it in a much subtler way than I think we're often used to on sort of animated broad comedy shows like this, and I really want to applaud the episode for that. Not only within that, I think there was some really funny, like, just gags, sort of smaller bits within this, like, making fun of Star Trek sort of mythos, especially some Star Trek the Animated Series stuff in here that I really enjoyed, as well as just some, like, generalized Star Trekian sci-fi tropes throughout here. That was just a lot of fun, and as a result, this episode didn't really feel like it was one of those, like, big, spectacular episodes, like the ones that everyone's gonna be talking about, like, years down the line, like, oh, do you remember that episode of Lower Decks? This episode doesn't feel like one of those, but what it is it really feels like one of those, like, homey episodes where you get to be with the characters in sort of like a nice low stakes situation that just kind of sweet, kind of fun, reveals the character, and is ultimately something that I honestly really love about, like, shows like Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager, and Enterprise that is a little bit missing in Discovery and Picard, I should say, nowadays, where it's just like nothing big happens, but it's kind of important to just sit with the characters and get to be with them in a sort of lower stakes situation, even lower stakes than we're used to on Lower Decks, and I kind of really appreciated it for that. And so for that element of it, I think while this episode is not going to be one of the highlights, the most memorable ones, it ultimately made me just feel kind of nice, and I just really enjoyed the episode. The only, like, real substantive knock that I can give to this episode overall is that the A-plot of the episode, the sort of bridge crew storyline going on here, and we'll talk a little bit more about it in the spoilers section, didn't really feel like it connected all that much with what's going on with the Lower Deckers. I mean, the best Lower Decks episodes so far have managed to interweave the sort of bridge crew sort of larger plot going on in with what the Lower Deckers are doing, whereas in this episode, it kind of just feels like tacked on to the side, which isn't necessarily bad, it's just not as neatly interwoven as I'm used to this series doing with these types of storylines. Also, there was a lot of scatological humor in this episode. Like, just to be honest with you, I'm not very much of a prude or get all that grossed out. I don't really get bothered by gross out humor, but I will say poop stuff is the stuff that grosses me out the most, that more than anything else, and there's a significant amount of it in this episode, so just be prepared for that. Also, not a topic that I would have thought I would ever have to discuss in a Star Trek show, but here we are. Poop stuff. There's a lot of poop. Enjoy your poop. Poop. Maybe I do like poop humor. Poop. I'm a child. Anywho. So that's basically my spoiler-free thoughts. Oh, I will actually, before I forget, the final gag of this episode, we'll talk about this more in the spoilers, but the final gag of this episode just had me rolling on the ground laughing. I was literally dying. It is my favorite callback that they've done. I kid you not, I watched this show on this computer screen right here. I was on this floor dying with laughter at the final moment of this episode. So if that doesn't tease you a little bit to go watch this episode, I don't know what will. But if you want to talk about it, we're going to have to get into the spoiler section. So go watch the episode, and we're coming back. I don't know why I said coming back as if, like, I'm going away. You just stop the video. Anyways, I'm taking off the hat now. I think it's like losing blood to my brain. Do a little Picard maneuver before we get into it. All right, so for this spoiler section, I'm going to talk about each storyline kind of in their own little segments, because most of these are fairly siloed away more than usual for a Lower Decks episode, so it's going to be kind of easier to talk about them individually. The first storyline that we get is sort of like the bigger storyline, the sort of bridge crew storyline, where we have Captain Freeman going to the Pack-led home planet to try to negotiate a peace treaty, ceasefire between the Pack-leds and the Federation, because we've had this sort of ongoing storyline in the background of this season starting last season, with the Pack-leds sort of being at war with the Federation, and sort of like the Titan having to deal with it and all that stuff that we were dealing with earlier this season. I like this a lot because it's sort of continuing the like continuity and sort of overarching story that's been going on in the background of Lower Decks this season. I also like that it's connecting with Captain Freeman's ongoing storyline this season, that she clearly is gunning for a promotion. I mean, Shax even says when they beam down to the planet, to the Pack-led home planet, which they call Pack-led Planet, which... perfect for the Pack-leds, by the way. He says they might give you an Enterprise for this, which, you know, Captain Freeman obviously wants. It would stoke her ego. So I kind of like that ongoing bit where it's like she really wants to prove herself with this situation. I also really love that the Pack-leds constantly call her Janeway, sort of mistaking her for Janeway the entire time, and Freeman's like, no, I'm Freeman. Start to learn a little bit more about Pack-led culture as well, that it's like the size of their helmet determines how important they are and how they can negotiate, and is like constantly miscommunicated to Freeman, which is absolutely hysterical. But I also like the little insight into the culture that we get here. But this situation gets complicated when another Pack-led appears on the Cerritos, kind of asking for asylum, maybe not exactly entirely clear, but that also obviously causes an issue for Freeman trying to negotiate with the Pack-leds, who don't want to have this person escape on the Cerritos. But it starts to become obvious that this Pack-led is clearly there to spy on the Cerritos. I love Kayshawn sort of like speaking in metaphor still, and also, by the way, I like seeing Kayshawn back because he's been kind of a little bit absent. He's been in like the background of the past few episodes, so I like seeing more front and center here, sort of working with Ransom to deal with this apparent spy on the ship. But obviously, as a Pack-led, can't do the job very well. Taking pictures of his own foot and things like that was absolutely hysterical. And also the fact that they go to the Starfleet gift shop and there's like a Cerritos shirt, absolutely wonderful. I was dying laughing at that. However, this whole storyline from here at this point kind of worked out a little bit obviously for me. I didn't hate the storyline. I mean, we sort of basically learned that clearly this was a spy. Kayshawn and Ransom lose track of him for a little while, which causes problems for Freeman on the planet. All like good kind of funny jokes, but not exactly spectacular or unexpected. I also like that we get like a pseudo revolution on the Pack-led planet, where sort of we get to see the like different people with even larger helmets sort of show up to negotiate with Freeman, and then all of a sudden revolutionaries come in to take over the planet, but then they finally gain power. It's like, oh no, the helmets won't control us anymore. But then one sort of takes power for himself and says, I will have all the power, and sort of everyone getting vested in power. It was honestly like basic politics and revolutionary dynamics for dummies, which was kind of weirdly clever in a really silly way with the Pack-leds, which I kind of enjoyed, but it wasn't particularly overly unexpected or super fascinating to me on a storytelling level. And then, you know, Kayshawn and Ransom, after dealing with some stuff that intersected with the Lower Deckers, found the Pack-led who had sort of lost himself into space because he thought it was the bathroom, but it was actually an airlock, getting into the scatological humor. And they're able to bring him down to the planet, and Freeman is able to trick the spy into revealing that they were going to release a bomb on Earth, which ultimately surprised me that Pack-led would be able to get anything onto Earth, especially after the Dominion War. But yeah, it was sort of an interesting storyline, but one that didn't like shock me all that much, and like I said, didn't intersect all that much with our main character's plot. So ultimately, I kind of feel like this part of the storyline was the weakest this week. But thankfully, the stuff that focused on our main characters was much better, in my opinion, in a much more subtle way that I really enjoyed. Let's focus on the Tendi storyline first. So all 4 of our Lower Deckers get assigned to ACD, which was Anomaly Consolidation duty, which is basically trash day. They basically have to go around to all the sort of upper decker crew members and go through their trash and get rid of stuff that they don't want anymore from missions and things like that. Great hysterical idea. I like this idea that the Lower Deckers just sort of have to clean up their trash from the missions, the leftover stuff. Kind of makes sense to me. Was a great setup. Boimler kind of goes off into his own storyline, so Mariner, Tendi, and Rutherford all are left to sort of do this trash duty, and it just gets progressively more and more awful for all of them. I like the little references here we get like nanobots like destroying Mariner's hand. We get Rutherford sort of blowing up like a balloon, like Willy Wonka was absolutely great. The slug, screaming slug that ate Tendi and pooped her out. Again, the scatological humor here in this episode was all very funny for me. The poop stuff again, I was like a little gross for me, even as someone who doesn't like gross out humor. But whatever, I'm a child. I'll laugh at anything. It's fine. So all of that was like good, but as I said, it was kind of like, oh, this is fine, but didn't knock my socks off in terms of storyline. But what I really loved was it's subtly built into Tendi's arc that's been going on this whole season, because Tendi, actually, we learn, assigned them this job. She actually requested it because she wanted to do something nice with everybody. She wanted to make them feel like they were close to the action by getting to go into all of the quarters of the upper deckers, which is so Tendi. It's so sort of part of her to like want to bring people together and to try to unify everyone, but getting frustrated when that isn't really understood or reciprocated, and feeling very frustrated that she feels dumb that she made the wrong choice. It's a situation that I've been in too. It's like I try to bring people together and ultimately just gets really frustrating. I understood this on like a deep level, and it feeds into this like idea that Tendi sort of brought up earlier in the season, that she's always kind of trying to please people. She's always trying to make things better because that's kind of what she feels she has to do to try and stand out, but also because she cares as well, but then ultimately can be detrimental to her. It's a nice little subtle character building of her, of someone who's like wants to care for people, and that's really sweet about her, but ultimately it kind of gets her to be ignored, pushed to the wayside, and forgotten sometimes too. And I thought that was just a real subtle building of her character. And I like that when she gets upset at herself, which is a situation I have definitely felt, she's holding this cube which turns her into a giant scorpion that starts attacking the ship, which I thought was great, and it was sort of like a nice little like sort of literalization of the feeling that she was going through that I have definitely felt. But this brings us over to Boimler's storyline, which I thought was the strongest storyline this episode, because Boimler sort of gets dragged off into this Redshirts group, which, by the way, I love the fact that this group of, like, ensigns that are trying to become captains to try and, like, appear like try to learn how to be more commander-like are calling themselves the Redshirts, which is clearly making fun of the fact that in the original series, starts with the original series, Redshirts were killed all the time, and these Redshirts say, like, oh, we feel invincible, makes us feel invincible, because in Next Generation, Redshirts denote command as opposed to security and engineering that it was in the original series. Really, like, it's a deep cut to a degree, but it's not so deep that like other people wouldn't get it, but also it's like very like subtly played. It's not like beat you over the head like we call ourselves the Redshirts, and like, oh, and like it was a very subtly played joke, but one that I found to be very deep in some of its implications and ideas, despite it also being something that like people could get. I thought it was a really, I'm gushing a lot about this joke, but I just loved that so much. But I also loved the makeup of this team of Redshirts, because we get Jennifer the Andorian, we get like a human guy and a human, apparently a human girl. I couldn't tell. I might be misremembering that. We also get a Kzinti from the animated series. Some other of you I know in my reviews have pointed out that there's been a Kzinti in the background of a few of the scenes this year, which has been amazing. But I missed in my first few watch throughs, but now this Kzinti gets to be front and center, which is absolutely great. And we also get a great joke, because when Boimler sort of goes off with them to sort of like learn how to be a commander sort of thing, we get a great joke with the Kzinti where he's like, you need to have good posture and don't stand like this, stand like this, which the hunched over look was how the Kzinti looked in the animated series. So nice little subtle joke to the animated series there. There was a few other good little beats here. I love the like speechify moment where like Boimler gets to like give a big speech. We get to see the Enterprise D set sort of thing on here, and he gives like the sort of stereotypical moment speech, and everyone's sort of like, oh, gets dazzled by him. And also the bit where like he becomes like buff and strong through the sort of makeover by Jennifer, and his hair gets changed, was all very, very good little jokes in there. But this is also getting at where I thought that this episode was sort of retreading old ground with Boimler, because again, I feel like in the first season we had already seen Boimler sort of go through this like learning to be a better commander thing, and I already kind of felt a little bit perturbed earlier in the season where they seemed to regress his character by taking him from a lieutenant where he was on the Titan and demoting him to an ensign for no real reason, in my opinion. So it felt like they were trying to retread this, and I thought that the direction that they were going to go was that Boimler was going to get drawn into this group of people and sort of be like, oh, I'm better than them, I don't need to hang out with Rutherford Clifford and Tendi and Mariner and all of them. I don't need to be with them anymore. I can hang out with these guys to sort of earn my stripes, sort of thing. But that never happened. And I'm going to get to that in a little bit, but that is the part that I thought was really subtle and really showed actually growth for Boimler in a way that I did not think that this storyline was going to go down, because I thought it was going to go down the more typical affair. It really struck a chord with me because we do get a moment where the Redshirts start to like look down their noses at Boimler's friends. And this is the moment where I thought Boimler was going to be like, yeah, those guys suck, and like was going to hang out with them and sort of then get drawn back into them. But that doesn't happen. Boimler actually immediately, without any hesitation, stands up for them and says, hey, no, they are my friends and they are good people and you don't get to make fun of them. I loved that was instantaneous for him. It wasn't like the sort of like, oh, he has to learn that. Like, no, he's like, I'm going to defend them. They're my friends. Loved that, because it really shows that Boimler does actually already have all these captain qualities within him, and that gets reinforced when it intersects with Tendi's storyline, where he goes in and humiliates himself in front of Tendi because it makes her laugh, and that's what's needed by a commander in that moment to save her and save the crew around them. Whereas the other Redshirts just go in and try and dazzle with speeches, which is great because everyone was like getting stars in their eyes, but they weren't being helpful. And Boimler actually helps Tendi by making her laugh by humiliating himself, and I thought that was so sweet, and the fact that Boimler does it without any hesitation. That was the thing that got me, that just really showed me the subtle nuance of the writing here, that Boimler just immediately did that and had no hesitation about being willing to debase himself in order to save a friend, in order to do what real commanders do and be his own commander. And I just absolutely love this. I loved that this episode seemed like it was immediately leaning into these sitcom tropes that I've seen before and just subverted it to showcase how far these characters have come in a really good way. So while I have criticisms of how Boimler has been demoted overall this season, within this episode, I think it worked great to just show who he is. And I absolutely adored it. And I loved the final moment where the sort of ensign guy, I forget his name, who like been wanting to become like acting captain for a day on the bridge, he sort of asks Ransom, and Ransom sort of says, oh yeah, that's fine, not a big deal, who cares, but then actually takes the moment to compliment Boimler on his captaincy, and that leads all the other people around Boimler, the other Redshirts, to gravitate to Boimler, showing that when you are a true commander and you show a true command spirit, that's what makes you a leader. That's what makes people look up to you, not just the aesthetic of it. And that's just such a great message, so Star Trekian, and so well done for Lower Decks to do it. I loved it. I loved that so much. I really adored it. And then the final little beat on the bridge where the ensign guy gets to be acting captain for all of a second and then gets assigned to clean up the poop in the airlock was absolutely hysterical. Again, poop jokes. We're here for them. You know what? Screw it. Poop jokes are Star Trek canon now. I'm here for it. I want more. More poop jokes, everybody. Where is it in Discovery and Picard? We better get some poop jokes. I'm doubling down on this. We're doing it. Oh God, that's the real number one. Number two. What have I done? But this leads me to the final moment of the episode and my favorite throwaway gag, at the very least this season, possibly over the entire series, where we learn that Mariner has gotten one of the gems that can like make them call anywhere in the galaxy, and they decide to prank call Armis, the tar monster from Skin of Evil who killed Tasha Yar, and he's just like, I want to be evil, I wish I had someone to mess with. They're just joking. He's like screaming. I kid you not. I was rolling on the ground. I know it's just a random toss away gag. I loved it. That was truly fantastic, and I was just literally dying with laughter. I was dying like Tasha Yar was dying. Like, throw up my funeral in Windows XP screensaver. It was great. Anywho, yeah, like I said, this episode was not the most memorable, in my opinion. It was not going to be one that sticks out in my mind when I sort of, like, think of great episodes of Lower Decks, and yet it's episodes like these that are the ones that warm my heart the most, endear me the most to these characters, and really shows me the depth of these characters that we have on screen in Lower Decks. So yeah, is it the big bombastic ones? No, but it's the ones that are important to make us really care about these characters. And that's kind of what Lower Decks is all about, in my opinion. So loved this episode, thought it was great. But I'd love to hear all of your thoughts. Did you like this episode? Did you hate this episode? Let me know down in the comments below. Did you like the poop jokes? Let me know that too, because apparently that's Star Trek now. Let me know your favorite. Let me know your number one, number two. We're gonna end this. Thanks for watching. Live long and prosper.